So I got my notes up, ready to go. All right, cool. Welcome back, everybody. All right. Welcome to This Just In.
And it,
All right, so today we are going over some crazy crap. Okay, so we are
it's a brand new
Huh?
series.
I know,
Brand
brand
new
new series, first episode of our brand new series, and we are going over lobotomies. And
Well, not, but yay,
yeah,
but not yay.
it's fucked up, but
Glad to be off the politics. You know what I mean? I'm so happy to be away from the politics for a while.
absolutely, yeah. No, I mean, I know
Yeah.
this one's not going to be easy at all, but it's different, and that's good. I'm really glad that we decided to like switch it up like that because those were so heavy, like
They
very
were,
heavy.
they
Not
were
saying
hard.
this isn't. I feel like, and
No,
I
it's
can't even
just
really
heavy.
like nail why I had such an obsession with lobotomies. Like I would look up that stuff when I was like,
In the line, and probably like how many horror movies
yeah,
back in the day that we were obsessed with. I mean, House on Haunted Hill, like, yeah, I would say all of
yeah,
those might have had something to do with it.
yeah. I mean, it's definitely a barbaric procedure, but it
Yeah.
really was necessary to some people, like at the time. I mean, like
Yeah.
it's hard to
Yeah.
say like what all they had. I know that we have a lot of like medications that can help now. There's like laws, really good, well,
Yeah.
not really good laws, but better
Consent.
laws, which I hope
Informed consent.
exactly.
Which I think honestly, I think informed consent is going to be like the through line on every of these episodes that we're doing in this series, because we're talking about crimes against humanities, yes, but it's a series that's going to cover kind of, how are we going to say this? It's going to cover more psychiatric and medical crimes against
Yes.
humans. So yeah, the through line I think is going to be informed consent. Is going to be the biggest thing that we're going to be kind of jumping on with this.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I feel like to me, it kind of represents like a snapshot in time when like medical consent was questionable, if even non-existent. Really, like
Yeah.
how many people had their fucking brains scrambled just because people didn't want
Yeah.
to deal with them, you know? And like, yeah, it's just they have outbursts and they have needs and they have, and a lot of them just didn't have patience and they didn't have the means to care for them really.
Right.
So
And it's like it's definitely almost a comment on how society viewed people at
yeah,
that time. People of color, women, people with either physical abnormalities or psychological disorders. Like this is definitely it's two sides. It's non-informed consent, medical malpractice and torture on the medical side of things, but on the other side, it's a society that did not question or care either.
yeah.
So it's going to be hard to place blame in this one because there's blame, I think, across the board on this one.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I'll go through with some trigger warnings on this one. Yeah, medical
Yeah.
violence, abuse, descriptions of invasive brain surgeries, unethical experimentation, psychiatric institutionalization, consent violations, graphic medical detail, mental health stigma, trauma, suffering, historical negligence, death, injury, and abuse to the vulnerable populations, including children, women, and people who are institutionalized. So, yeah.
Thanks for the trigger
Yeah.
warning, Amy. And I'm gonna jump kind of right into it. And I'm gonna give us some background on like why and how lobotomies even sort of why they came into our medical landscape at
Yeah.
all. Okay, so going way back, actually going back about 7,000 years before lobotomy became a treatment, people were using a similar practice called trepanation. It's the removal of a part of the skull with an auger or saw. It's usually cut into a square from what I've
Yeah.
seen, but I don't think that they were specific on how. I think that that was more due to the tools that they had to use. That's kind of the only cut they could
Yeah.
get, is more of a square out of the skull. Okay, so during this time, mental disorders were often seen as demonic possessions or afflictions from some evil being. So we're talking when trepanation was used, this is 7,000 years ago, and there wasn't a lot, anything known of mental disorders of any kind. So, of course, everything was kind of put on, like I said, a possession or an evil entity or some
Mm.
otherworldly thing, right? Oh, so fast forward to the 1700s and things aren't much better. Asylums, asylums are popping up all over to house people with intellectual or developmental disabilities and also learning disorders, speech impediments, not speaking the native
Oh my
language.
gosh.
Immigrants? Oh, yeah. People with major or minor physical deformities or handicaps. Women who crossed any line deemed unacceptable at the time. Poor people, unhoused people, orphans that didn't follow the rules or get adopted.
God.
And these were all alongside people who committed crimes and deemed insane by the courts. Okay, so these places were usually unclean and overcrowded and used barbaric treatments to control their residents and isolate them from the public. Now, this means putting them in rooms, and we're talking hundreds, to a room where they're sleeping on the floor, where there's a drain in the middle of the room. And this is how they're urinating and defecating. And then it's just buckets of water being thrown. So it all goes into the center of the room. Some of them are chained to a wall simply because they are harm to people around them or themselves. Stripped, their clothes are removed a lot of times because they see their clothes as an instrument that they can use to harm themselves or others. So just places of low to no dignity, really, for the people there and also the people working there, if I'm
Yeah.
being honest, right? So heading into the late 1800s, these institutions have only grown in size and number across the world, with all of the previous problems still prevalent. The simple truth is that society carried shame with people having mental disabilities, and status or strength of a family was of high importance during these times. And having someone with a disability in your family could poison the well, so to speak. So they were hid away, and little thought went into the welfare of these folks. Now, this would change to their detriment, honestly, when in 1876, a German physiologist, Friedrich Goltz, performed the first brain surgery for behavior modification on canines and frogs with mixed success. They turned them into zombie frogs or zombie dogs. I think half of the dogs died immediately, and then all the rest of the dogs died within like a 6-month to 2-year period following this. It wouldn't be until 1888 when Gottlieb Burckhardt, a Swiss psychiatrist with no surgical training or prior knowledge, removed the frontal cortex in 6 patients he was overseeing in an asylum with, again, mixed success. I think mixed success is about the best that we ever get with these kinds of
Yeah.
treatments. 2 died. 2 went into a trance-like state, which according to Burckhardt is a success, considering their prior psychiatric symptoms. And 2 had no serious negative effects except epilepsy, motor weakness, word deafness, and sensory aphasia. So basically not feeling things or not feeling the things that are touching
Yeah.
you know? So that's success to this guy. He was ridiculed by others after reporting his findings, and he quit practicing psychosurgery. But someone has to do the psychosurgery, and somebody will do the psychosurgery, or else we wouldn't have an episode
Yeah.
about lobotomies, right? So in 1935, Antonio Moniz, a Portuguese neurologist, which I mean, at least he had like some kind of background in understanding the mind, because up until this point, none of them
Yeah.
did. None of them
They just had
had
fucking
any
audacity. That's what they
experience.
had.
They just had audacity and loads of it. So I'm not excusing Moniz or anything, but either way, at least he had some kind of
Mhm.
background in medicine. So in 1935, Antonio Moniz, a Portuguese neurologist, observes chimps receive frontal lobe severing, and he develops what is called the leucotomy, which is two holes punctured into the frontal cortex and filled with ethanol alcohol. Now, he performs his leucotomy with mixed
Yep.
success. There's that word again. And publishes his findings that Moniz's leucotomy is regarded as an effective treatment, and it gains momentum quickly in institutions across Portugal and Italy. And by 1936, information about Moniz and the leucotomy crosses paths with Walter Freeman and James Watts, American neurologists that would go on to use and abuse this treatment at the cost of many lives, including Rosemary Kennedy of the American royalty Kennedys, after she received a lobotomy at 23 years old, rendering her incapacitated for the whole of her life. But that's just one lobotomy of nearly 50,000 in the US
Yeah.
alone. And Walter Freeman is the greatest contributor to that number, beginning in 1936.
Absolutely. So in 1936, Dr. Walter Friedman and Dr. James Watts adapted Moniz's techniques and coined the name lobotomy. So this method evolved from drilling holes in the skulls and severing the white matter in the frontal lobe to more streamlined transorbital lobotomy. And that was in the 1940s. So where an actual ice pick is inserted into the eye socket, like right here. They would move the eyeball aside, and then they would insert.
Give the
Yeah,
example.
for
You're
anyone
right.
listening, if you decide to watch us, I'm shoving my pinky finger right into my eyeball, right where the fucking ice pick would have been inserted. And so, yeah, so they inserted it, and then they actually used like a little mallet to um,
Yuck,
hammer it
yuck.
in to where it's supposed to go. And then they jiggle that fucker around to make sure they
Oh
scrambled
boy.
that shit up. Okay.
Yeah, just if you move it around,
Yeah. And so
you know.
this became a practice that he taught to just
Mhm.
fucking anybody. So literally
Mhm.
anyone was like, hey, this is like he was streamlining it. Like there's even a lobotomy mobile service. Just like the ice cream
Oh,
truck,
wow.
there was a lobotomy truck. What kind of music do you think that would be playing? Stuff of fucking nightmares, that's for sure. Can you
Pure
imagine?
noises.
Probably like whenever you're opening up a Jack in the Box noise, you know?
Mhm.
That
Mhm.
type of fucking
Probably.
creepy ass shit.
I mean, yeah, and can we so the transorbital lobotomy, it really sped things up, you know what I mean? I think that's, like, the biggest takeaway, like, the original lobotomy, right, it was
I know,
just
yeah.
it wasn't just, but it was a treatment that was close to the leucotomy where they would go into the
Yeah,
brain, puncture the whole frontal cortex, that stuff. But the transorbital made things more efficient, from what I understand. And a lot of times people could do this with local anesthetic,
yeah,
right?
or
Yeah, that's crazy.
yeah, absolutely.
That's crazy.
So yeah, I mean, the transorbital lobotomy was performed sometimes without anesthesia as well. One of Dr.
I'm sorry to interrupt again. If our listeners don't know, the ice pick lobotomy and the transorbital lobotomy are the same lobotomy. It's the same thing. The transorbital is the actual name of it, the treatment itself. But the ice pick lobotomy is what it's been coined at, like, society and our culture or
Yeah,
whatever.
'cause
Sorry, I
yeah,
just
that's
wanted to
what the
throw that out
tool
quickly.
actually looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's awful. So,
Hmm.
yeah, so it was performed with or without anesthesia.
Do you want
The little boy
our
that
billions?
got his lobotomy whenever he was 12 years old, his name is Howard. Dolly. And if I am
Yeah.
correct, yeah, he died in February of this year. Yeah,
Oh,
I know.
Howard.
So
Let's see about his story.
absolutely. And so he was 12 years old at the time when he got the procedure, and the symptoms he was experiencing to need this procedure is a little vague from the research that I have. His stepmother really just wanted to fucking get rid of him. It sounded like he
Yeah.
was a rambunctious little boy, very normal. And she didn't want to bother with him, really. So yeah, there's a lot of interviews with Howard Doley. He's done
He
yeah,
wrote a
he wrote a
book.
book. So there's a lot to, read about, experience about, his whole experience. A lot of the other people who have had this procedure, they're no longer with us because of the time that it was popular. Majority of those patients have already passed. So when the procedure did not turn him into a complete vegetable, his stepmother made him a ward estate. Dolly was haunted his whole life by questions about what he did wrong to deserve this. So for 40 years, Dolly never talked to his dad about why his dad allowed his stepmom to do this and to have this procedure done. But in 2004, he finally had that hard conversation with his dad and how and why it all went down. So his father told him that his stepmother had taken him to several doctors that claimed he was a normal boy until she found Dr. Freeman. He claimed he was manipulated by his wife and Dr. Freeman. So he was basically putting blame on everybody else, not taking responsibility. So even though Dolly's father refused to take any responsibility, he still took some solace in talking with him after all of that time, and he claimed to be one of the happiest moments of his life, getting to reconnect with his dad.
I'm sad they passed away, but like it's so important. His book is called My Lobotomy.
Yeah,
It's by Howard Doley, I'm pretty
yeah,
sure. I think I have it in my show notes, which, yeah, all this information and way for you to find this book if you want to read it or watch any
yeah,
interview. I
he's
think
got a lot.
NPR did a really amazing write up on it. Yeah. So, there's a lot, and it's from his perspective as being a survivor of a lobotomy at the hands of Walter
Yeah,
Freeman, the guy who kind of, he's the master of lobotomies, I would say. Well, I guess Moniz is,
yeah,
but
yeah.
he is. Yeah. Yeah.
She's the one that kind of made it
So,
took it to
yeah,
America. Yeah,
accessible.
more accessible. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. What now? I kind of want to talk about what was going on during this time, during the 50s and the 50s, and the time where people were being lobotomized at the highest rate,
yeah,
right? During those periods, I want to make it clear that like it wasn't just Walter Freeman. Like this was a practice that was picked up and adopted by almost every major healthcare facility across our country and other countries. We weren't the
yeah.
only country using the lobotomy. We weren't the first country to use the lobotomy.
Hmm.
It was being used in Italy long before us. So, but we adopted it and we adopted it quickly. And because of Walter Freeman and the ice pick or the transorbital, we made it even
Hmm.
faster. And so this is the parts of this that are hardest to read about for me are reading about the story of like the women who were lobotomized because they divorced from their
Hmm.
husband and they had nowhere to go. So they were put in an institution. And because of them being at that institution as a result of that, because it was a treatment and practice being used at the time, these women would get lobotomized, or a woman that couldn't speak English would get lobotomized just because they couldn't understand what she was saying. And now she's hysterical. I mean, if you look at some of the, in the ledger of why a lobotomy was given, they give a reason in a lot of these old ledgers, and a lot of the reasons were hysteria, and it's so crazy to me to think like, I mean, I would have been, you would have been,
Absolutely.
we would have definitely been, and like for being just loudmouths or not giving a fuck, you know what I mean? Children, that's hard, that's tough, and people of color were lobotomized for not just control purposes, but for experimentation
Yeah,
purposes, I mean, this was during some rough times for people of color, for sure, especially in this country. But I want to make it very clear that, like, the reason this was allowed to go on was because there was no system in place to protect these people.
absolutely.
Now there are some systems in place to protect some of them in some
Mhm.
settings. We'll say that. That's as far as I'll go with it. I mean, I'll talk more about it at the end of the episode, but I just want to make it very clear that the landscape was so much different back then. Nobody was trying to rehab anyone in these
Yeah,
institutions. Nobody cared generally about the people in these institutions. These institutions housed people that were not wanted by society first. So remember that first. Like, this institution did not breed these people to harm these people. These people were thrown away first for whatever societal, stake was at play at the time or whatever. But they, unfortunately, because there was a system of informed consent set up yet, and it wouldn't be set up for much later, these atrocities were allowed to happen. Not just lobotomies. I mean, psychosurgery was running rampant during these times. Well, things like electroshock therapy and then other extreme like psychosurgeries were definitely a part of the landscape. And then you couple that with no informed consent system or system to protect the residents of these institutions, and a society that doesn't see them as human
yeah,
anyway. I mean, if anything, I'm not ever going to say or condone lobotomies as a treatment or practice. I think it's barbaric and it's awful. But in a way, if Walter Freeman, if Watts, if all these other doctors hadn't gone in and done this, I don't know how long it would have been before somebody went in to then start taking care of these people in the way that they need to be taken care
yeah,
of, or protected in the way that they need to be protected, or advocated for or supported in the way that they need to be advocated for. Because up until that point, nobody was bothering to look at all.
yeah,
It just sucks that the people that were looking were ice pick crazy as
yeah,
well. It just really does suck. So I'm not justifying it, but it's like, understand that we can speak with hindsight. We can speak with like all of these like modern, our modern day of medicine, like where we're at with medicine right now and where we're at with like mental health care and stuff like that. It was just not the same back then. It just
yeah.
wasn't,
One
you
thing
know.
that, like,
So
comes to mind as well is I feel like why society now is such a huge shock for older people is because they're used to having people like that tucked away and you
sure.
don't see them. But now they're allowed to stay on the street. They're allowed to, go where they want. They're here. They live in this society as well.
Sure. They've always
And
been,
I
yeah.
feel like that is probably a really huge shock to the older
Sure.
generation. And I'm not going to excuse
I'm
their
sure.
behavior in any way, but those types of people were really tucked away and just disposed of.
Yeah, there's definitely, there's a naivety with some older people
Absolutely.
about people with intellectual or developmental disabilities. There definitely is. I've seen that for myself.
And even with the way
Um,
Trump treats disabled people, he thinks that
sure.
they all should just be killed.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
he's,
essentially. Well, because yeah, if they care, if they're not helping with the workforce, then he doesn't give a fuck
yeah.
about them. You know what I mean?
So, and I say this because he is of that generation. That is why I said that,
Yeah,
not
I-
anything else. So
it's true.
he has made
Yeah, yeah,
remarks about that. I'm not pulling that out of my ass. If anybody
yeah.
must insist, I could find a source easily. Okay.
Test her, just test her.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, yeah, poor Howard though. I feel bad. I feel bad for everyone that got lobotomized, leucotomized, repinationized.
Yeah.
I don't know even what you would say. Anybody that has had their brain scrambled for any kind of behavior modification it's deplorable
Hmm.
and it's sad. But I don't. I feel like I always, when I hear things about lobotomies and psychosurgery, it's always like the doctor was the monster with the ice pick. It's like, don't forget that this doctor would have had no one to ice pick if people had cared about the people he was ice picking at the
Yeah.
time. If it's the truth. I mean, it's a harsh truth, but it's the truth. Like, we didn't care about women, so that's why women got lobotomized. We didn't care about people of color, that's why they were higher rates to get lobotomized. And obviously, people with disabilities still are not really looked at in our society. So imagine back, we're talking about 70 years ago. So no, it's deplorable, but I understand how it
Yeah.
happened. I mean, I can see how it happened with all of those different factors at play. Not any
Mhm.
one. Remember, if one doctor with an ice pick would have started running through hospitals, lobotomizing people, and and everybody would have cared about these people, he would have been stopped. We wouldn't be talking about
Yeah.
anything right now.
Especially with the rates.
50,000 Americans? That's because nobody
Yeah,
cared.
especially like
It's
with
simple.
the different rates. Okay, so this is back whenever Moniz was doing his experimentation. So he reported that 35% of the patients improved, 35% slightly improved. The rest were either unchanged or symptoms were worse. So I could not find how many patients died from the procedure, but some of the patients appeared more calm, less agitated, and some were able to leave the institution where they were housed for years. Speculation again, because I do not have the exact source information, but I
Sure.
read that immediately other doctors found Moniz's procedure to be barbaric and not fully testing its lasting effects, and only observed his patients after the procedure for a few days, and then most then sent them on their way. So doctors who originally had worked with Moniz began to distance themselves from working with him and due to this procedure. As far
Right.
as like the
Yeah.
outcomes of this, I would I would want it to be way fucking closer to at least
Sure.
50%. At least 50% were like cured or not cured, but like their symptoms were better or
Right.
something, you know?
Sure. And I mean, you do because you care. But back to that, you know what I mean? If you don't care about the welfare of these people, then you don't care what happens
Yeah.
to them. If you don't know, not even don't care, I wouldn't even say don't care. I think that there was a lot of just uneducation, or misinformation, or I don't know. There's just a lack of knowledge about the brain back then, just in
Yeah.
general, let alone to the layman, let alone to people on the streets. So if you had a mother in 1938 and or 39 and she's poor and she's got 4 kids and one of them keeps smacking his head into the wall and he won't stop and he won't eat and he keeps doing all these things that she can't control and she doesn't know what's
Yeah.
wrong with him. There's no medicine at this time. I mean, none that she can give him because psychotropic medication is not a thing at
Yeah.
this point. Remember that. And there's no journals that she's reading about different studies because nobody cares about these people. They're not studying them. There's no research being done. And then a doctor comes along and says, "Hey, there is a treatment. And all we do is this minimal surgery in the head and we do this and they'll be good then and they'll be calm and you can control them."
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I can't speak for that mother, but I don't blame a mother for going, "Yeah, let's try it. What else am I going to do?"
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So there's always like that. We have hindsight. And I'm not like, this is really hard for me because it's like I said, it's deplorable. Lobotomies are disgusting. But I'm not going to blame the people who were agreeing to lobotomies with no information out of
Yeah.
desperation. You know what I mean? Without any other resources or help around, because this isn't a time where there's like, where there's an office you can take your kid to see what kind of mental health resources you can get or advocacy. No. Back that out.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so sad that many people got a treatment, any treatment, let alone lobotomies. But really, this speaks on any treatment, any physical or mental treatment that's given to them without their consent and without being informed about what that's going to maybe do to them. and what the outcome could be. Like, that's really sad to me. That's the saddest part of all of it,
Absolutely.
if
Yeah,
anything.
absolutely.
Mm, well, I mean, it did come to an end for a reason. Do you want me to talk
Yeah,
about that?
absolutely.
Lobotomies, they're being used widely, and
Yeah.
they're obviously we talked about why they're being used for different number of different reasons and a number of different people, for for sometimes no reasons we have
Yeah.
found honestly. And then 1950, a drug called chlorpromazine or thorazine, as it's more commonly referred to, is developed in Paris. And after some initial trials, it is distributed to the United States. And by 1954, it is being used to treat a variety of psychotic disorders and schizophrenia. Fortunately, lobotomies won't be phased out until much later. Thorazine is coined as being a large reason for this, though. So it does take a while for thorazine to catch on and lobotomies to fade out, but a lot of people say the introduction of thorazine and then subsequently other psychotropic medications will be the reason that lobotomies aren't used anymore. So Walter Freeman during this time continued to practice the transorbital lobotomies, even after seeing promising effects of thorazine and other psychotropic medications being developed. It is after thorazine when Howard Doley is lobotomized by Freeman. So Howard Doley, I just had that in my notes. He was lobotomized by Walter Freeman after the advent of thorazine. Wow, so really unnecessary, But since lobotomies are losing popularity by the mid to late 50s, Freeman is doing them less, but it wouldn't be until 1967 when he lobotomized Helen Mortensen for the third time, and she dies of a cerebral hemorrhage that he is banned from practicing
Fuck.
surgery.
I didn't
That's
know
what
that people
happened.
got multiple.
Yeah, it was a common practice of his. He had a lot of return patients.
My God.
If it didn't work the first time, he'd go in there and scramble some more
My
a little at a
God.
time. So Helen Mortensen in 1967, yep, she died of a cerebral hemorrhage. And that's what got his whatever license. I don't even know if they had licenses back then, but that's what banned him from practicing surgery. Now, in 1949, you should know that Antonio Moniz, he received the Nobel Peace Prize for his leucotomy procedure. Over the years, a lot of people have protested this and called for its removal. But Portugal, by and large, still regard Moniz as an important contributor to mental health care and stand firm on the title staying in place.
Oh,
So Moniz, he did. So if you look up all the Nobel Peace Prizes, you're going to see one for leucotomies, which is where lobotomies came from, where they're derived from. Another note I have for everyone is Eunice Shriver. If you know Shriver, of the Kennedy family and sister of Rosemary Kennedy, she would be so strongly impacted by what her sister was subjected to after the lobotomy that she would dedicate her life to foreign policy to help individuals with developmental and intellectual disabilities. And she created the Special Olympics in 1968.
I
So all this time, we're up to the 90s, and people still don't really have like a lot of protections in institutions, if I'm being honest. Now, institutions are being phased out, and we're going into like more smaller residential spaces, but there still are institutions. There's still state hospitals, even running today, But by 1991, the Common Rule and Protection of Human Subjects legislation is passed into law. Guys, 91. Think about that.
yeah.
Literally, largely due to the outcome and findings of the Nuremberg trials and research found in the Belmont Report, or research involving prisoners without their consent. Now, to be clear, Mir attributed to the legal framework for the Nuremberg laws and code, but does not and never have passed the Nuremberg laws into our American legislation. So just so you know, we wrote up the law and we have told other countries to enforce the Nuremberg law, but we do not enforce it here. I didn't know that. I always thought that we had, but we wrote up the framework and helped write up the framework for like the law, but we didn't adopt it. So that's
Interesting.
fun. So we simply use the findings along with other reports of unconsented medical or psychiatric treatments to make a case to get the law passed. So basically, it wasn't that the Nuremberg law had been broken and that's what got them their rights. It's that they said, well, this is why they should have rights.
Yeah.
This is why they should have protections, is because of things that happened during World War II that came out during the Nuremberg trials. And then also the Belmont Report, which was, like I said, the prisoners that had research done without their consent. But it's not until 2018 when the final form of the Common Rule is revised to include individuals with developmental
God.
disabilities. In 2018, guys, those who could otherwise advocate for themselves. So the same people that were most subject to the lobotomies still were the last to get legal standing rights and protections against things like that. Now, this isn't to say that human rights, especially those of the vulnerable, aren't being violated right now in medical and mental health facilities all across the country and the world,
Yeah.
in fact. There are many states that have very, and I mean very ambiguous rules when it comes to psychosurgery, and many places, even in this country, have not outright banned the use of lobotomies. Although the medical and psychiatric community largely rejects its use and efficacy. So, just so you know, I went state by state and I wanted to see, like, are lobotomies, a psychosurgery, illegal? And you're not going to find many states where it outright says that. So it still can be used in practice, just
Yeah.
FYI. So the ACLU, the NAACP, and now NOW also opposed its use and were instrumental in fighting for changes to informed consent laws during the 70s. And here is the ACLU's official position. The practice of psychosurgery, particularly when applied to involuntarily committed patients or prisoners, constitutes a profound violation of fundamental constitutional rights, including the right to privacy, the right to free thought, and the prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment. It is the ACLU's position that true, voluntary, and informed consent is impossible to obtain from individuals in coercive settings, such as prisons or state institutions, making the use of these irreversible procedures a human rights violation that must be legally prohibited. So yeah, it was a real dumpster
Yeah.
fire time for mental health. And honestly, up until very recently,
Yeah.
obviously, kind of was. It's not that people were lobotomizing people until 2018. We were including everyone on those laws that went into effect in 1991. If you go down and you read the actual wording, it's like very specific to men or just children in some cases, but it leaves out adults that might have a disability and be in the hospital. So the wording is everything, and that's why all these rules and keep having these revisions, basically. That's why you see 1991 and then 2003 and then 2018 and now 2021. You'll always see these revisions because they still haven't really gotten the wording right. They're getting close, but they haven't gotten it completely right to include everyone in like a more nuanced way.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So yeah, it's still not perfect. It sucks. It's still not perfect, but at least there's people looking out for the rights, and informed consent is being standardized across the board in mental health and in psychiatric and medical facilities all across the world. Like, I think that's really a trend that hasn't just been going on, but we'll probably continue to hopefully see more spaces where informed consent is everything.
Yeah, absolutely. So, since lobotomies are not happening anymore, there are some procedures that have been derived from lobotomies. So, these are called cingulotomies and capsulotomies. And I'm not a medical person whatsoever, and I don't exactly know what the majority of what they're saying about exactly, because they're talking about different quadrants of the brain. I'm just not extremely knowledgeable about that, but it's a neurosurgical procedure that creates lesions in the anterior cingulate cortex. So that's part of the brain's emotion regulation network. And so
Okay.
why the cingulate? It connects the prefrontal cortex, limbic system, and thalamus, and is hyperactive in OCD, depression, chronic pain patients. So targeting it can disrupt obsessive thought loops, and emotional dysregulation. It is performed with a stereotactic surgery, a 3D brain map, and electrodes or lasers on small lesions on each side. And so the patient's under anesthesia, and it's really only after like years of medication and therapy and inhibitions fail, kind of like a last resort.
It's what's being currently used,
Yes.
though. Like, if they need it, it's what's most similar to the lobotomy,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. And so it
Yeah.
says that about 30 to 60% of people who receive this show really, meaningful improvement. And there's real low risk of major cognitive side effects. And it,
But by that number, that's kind of similar to the numbers that all Freeman and Watts and Moniz and all those guys were getting back in the day.
absolutely.
It was like 30 to 70 or 30 to 60%.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
The problem is I just don't think we know enough about the brain to be going in. I mean,
Yeah, I
you
know.
know?
It's crazy. And so for the capsulotomy, it's a procedure that targets the internal capsule, specifically the anterior limb, which carries information between the thalamus and frontal lobes. So it plays a key role in reward processing, emotional regulation,
Hmm.
habit formation, and overactivity. So is seen in OCD and anxiety disorders. And so this one is performed
Hmm.
using a radio frequency, laser, or gamma knife, and then lesions are created in the anterior limb of the internal capsule. It's often done bilaterally. Again, I have no idea what any of this means. I was like, I can look at the map of a brain, but as far as like what is happening, I have no freaking clue. But
Sure.
those are a derivative of a lobotomy that are still being performed to this day. So yeah,
Yeah, and if you work in this field in the neuroscience fields and you can explain present day lobotomies to
yeah.
us, we would love to
Absolutely,
know.
and if they're still happening, like, please let us know, like, we're who knows if it's still actually, happening.
Something being
I mean,
used.
I did
I bet
read
it
a lot of
was
Reddit posts,
being used.
and they're saying that people are still getting them. I don't know, I'm not gonna use that as a source,
I don't
but
know. Yeah,
yeah,
but still, but like, who knows? Maybe I wonder if they're not being used in our like American health or mental health care system. I wonder if they're being used in any other
yeah,
countries still, because that is something. I guess I should have looked it up, but it's
yeah,
not
I didn't
something I
look that
did
up
for this
either.
episode. Maybe I'll look that up before our
Yeah,
trip. And if I do find any information on if it's still being used in other countries, I can bring it to our
yeah, that'd be
Twitch.
good,
But yeah.
for sure.
Well, my fellow would have been lobotomized women. That wasn't so bad. We got through
Yeah,
it. We did it.
absolutely, absolutely. Alright, cool, well, I'm definitely looking forward to the next one. It's
Me too.
insane.
It's gonna
Oh
be
my
so good.
god.
Do you want to
This
tell
next
what it
one
is?
is juicy, my friends, and it is about MK Ultra. And if you're
Okay,
around our
Ultra.
age, you know. So if you know, you know. If you're younger than us, you probably have no
Yeah.
fucking clue. So buckle up, because it's
And if you're older than us, you might be a part of it and not
shit.
even know it.
Absolutely.
Alright. Well, until next time,
All right.
guys.
See you guys later. Good night.